I toss that line to you. Is the governor on now?
Yes, he is.
Governor Tate Reeves, good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well this morning, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I was looking forward to doing the video, but apparently we're still working this out, and I think we had a little failure somewhere down the line, but no matter. I have limited time, and I know you're busy, but I want to get your thoughts on this. When we kind of laid the plan out here, exactly what the problems were, and your thoughts on this one, and anything new that you've been able to kind of put together and formulate between what the first response was yesterday to throughout the night till this morning.
No, I don't have any additional details. Let me just first say, Paul, thanks for having me on. I really do appreciate it. We've been busy. I know you've been busy over the last several weeks dealing with this historic pandemic, which in Mississippi has come on the heels of a historic event, flooding, historic tornadoes, historic year this year, probably when we go into June on an additional disaster through hurricanes. Let's hope not. Let's pray not. I will tell you that we've been speaking with various individuals, had a lot of conversations over the last couple of days. And I will tell you, I think it's critically important that we understand that in times of emergency, it is essential that we have the tools in place whereby we can respond to that emergency. In this particular emergency, it is the people out on the front lines that need to get this money as quickly as possible. We have to be very careful because this has Treasury guidelines. We have a model in place in Mississippi that we've utilized for the last 40 years, and there's no reason to change the law to take that authority away from the governor and give it to anyone else, because it just simply doesn't make sense. The reality is getting this money to the people of our state that are hurting all over our state, whether it's small business owners or educators who are working every single day or other individuals. We've got to get this money in their hands as soon as possible.
Is this a matter of, is it constitutional or legal or not? And I guess you got lawyers, they got lawyers. As a matter of fact, kind of an irony, because I'm not sure this has ever happened before. We've had two Republicans, when we had Republicans, both House and Senate leaders, who are lawyers, and I know we probably had as far as Democrats are concerned. So, but even then, it's been a while. But it's a battle of legality right now, and that's going to be decided today if with the resumption at 10 o'clock?
No, Paul, it's not a matter of legality. It's a matter of power. It's a matter of who controls the money. The legislature has the ability to appropriate any and all general fund money of the state. They can appropriate money unless and until they cede that authority to the executive branch. In 1980, the legislature, very smartly, I would add, ceded that authority only in the event of an emergency declaration. The law is very clear. That's the reason that earlier in the week, I'm told that the lieutenant governor and maybe others were making phone calls talking about filing lawsuits against us. They determined that the law is clear. The governor has the authority to manage federal money in the event of an emergency. And so that's why they're meeting today, so they can change the law so that they can get control of the money. And so it's not a matter of legality. The law is clear. Otherwise, the legislature wouldn't be meeting to change the law. They would simply be suing us in a court of law.
Well, that is a pertinent question, though, because if the legality was on the side of the House or the Senate, then the resumption of the legislature for one day to do this would not be necessary.
The only thing the legislature can do today, Paul, is change the law. They can't interpret the law. And so we are, and let me give you an example, Paul. I've got 350 National Guardsmen that are currently on order for the COVID-19 response. I went to President Trump. I asked President Trump to give us Title 32 funding, which is full federal funding to pay these National Guardsmen. That's what we're doing. We're using federal money that was not otherwise appropriated by the legislature to fund the response. That's what we're doing at MEMA. That's what we're doing when we buy PPP to get it to our hospitals. That's what we do when we get PPP to get it to our emergency first responders. We're utilizing the emergency management laws to manage the response. It is critical that the legislature not change that, because if they do, from henceforth, every single time we have a tornado, every single time we have a hurricane, we will be managing that through special session of the legislature. I don't think anybody in Mississippi that is not in leadership, at least in the legislature, thinks that's a good way to do it. In fact, I think they think it's a bad way to do it. The point in question here, the only difference between this money, Paul, and every other federal dollar we get is the number of zeros associated with it. You may remember after Hurricane Katrina, Mississippi got $5.4 billion in monies from the federal government. The model that we have set up is identical to the model that was set up in 2006 by Governor Barbour. You'll recall then the Speaker of the House was Billy McCoy, the Lieutenant Governor was Amy Tuck. Mm-hmm. They did not try to change the law to take that money away from Haley Barbour. It's a power grab, and that's the only thing I can tell you.
Well, I think most of us are trying to figure this out on the outside of that. But your statement there is one I was going to ask you, because if you're out of session, sine dies happen. If there was the tornado damage and the feds sent in some money, you'd have to call a special session. The problem is there, and we've seen this forever, regardless of which power is parties in power, is when that happens, everybody out there wants their share of this, whether you're in the southern part of the state, Delta, wherever it happens to be. You have a prolonged fight over this, and that concerns all of us.
Well, Paul, you've been around a long time, and you have hit the nail on the head. Do we want to have a prolonged battle that goes through the process so that we can get these monies in people's hands a month from now, 2 months from now? Is it going to be 3 months from now? This, by the way, we have a deadline. These are monies that have to be spent by December 31 of 2020. Now, that's the deadline is required by federal law. What I would tell you is the deadline for those people in Mississippi who are hurting, those people who have lost their jobs, almost 160,000 of them, mm-hmm. Those people like teachers who have taken money out of their own pocket and spent money to upgrade their technology. Look, we're having a hard time at the governor's office this morning utilizing our technology to get on your show. Can you imagine what's going on in places like Itawamba County? They're trying to teach kids. Teachers are spending their own money upgrading their own technology. We need to get money in their hands right now, not a month from now, not a year from now, today. In fact, yesterday is too daggum late. So we need to get going on this, and we don't need a political struggle over power that does nobody back in Itawamba County or George County any good.
Governor of the state, Tate Reeves, have you met with them? I mean, personally, not text, not anything else, but in a room, 6 feet apart, of course. Have you met with them, sat down and talked to them on a regular basis and said, here, if you have problems with maybe where we're putting this out, from distance learning to some of the municipalities, workforce development, do you have problems with where I intend to put the money with the legislature on an advisory capacity, or is there other places that you think it needs to go? Was that conversation ever done?
I think that's critically important, Paul. In fact, I think having legislative input in where these monies are spent is critically important. We have had, I can't tell you how many calls with the House, with the Senate, with the Speaker, with the Lieutenant Governor, with mayors, with supervisors, with sheriffs. We have had calls with the Legislative Black Caucus earlier this week, the leadership of the caucus, and asked them what their thoughts were. We have been very extensive in keeping everyone apprised of what's going on with our emergency response. And we have been very clear at every press conference I've had. We've said, look. Listen, I
don't want to interrupt you, but I know going down the line you can hear the music, maybe not, but we got a break coming up. Your option here, and I know you're a busy guy. You want to hold on for another quick section, or you got to go?
Yeah, I'll hold on for a second.
Okay, hold on, but back more. Also want to ask you about something on the press conference yesterday about the food shortages, and Andy Gibson answered this, and we'll talk about that with the governor. Talking expansive, talking to quarantine Mississippians in other states and a couple of other countries this morning, as always. By the way, for those people letting you know in Mississippi, it's not as bad as where some of you folks are in other states. Fellow Mississippians, we had 246 cases yesterday. To add to that, And I think 11 new deaths. I think I'm right on that, Governor. Governor Tate Reeves is with me this morning. Is that right? 246 and 11. So I don't know about peaking, but it doesn't seem to be going down fast.
Right. Well, and I'll tell you what you're going to find out later this morning is the Department of Health is going to announce yesterday's numbers, and we actually are going to hit an all-time high in new cases. We're also going to hit an all-time high in new deaths on yesterday. Now, again, a lot of that is reporting, and it's more about when the actual cases and the tests are done than it is when we actually had date of onset of illness. But we have been relatively flat somewhere between 160 and 300 new cases over the last really 30 days, and so we're not seeing the huge peak that we saw in places like New Orleans and places like New York. But I will tell you, one of the things that I'm concerned about with the legislature and the leadership making the decision to come in today is, we're going to put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in a very small building from all over the state. And I'm just hopeful, and I will tell you, Paul, I prayed this morning that no one has the virus and that no one is contagious, because there are a lot of legislators, most of whom are very, very good people, who fit into that vulnerable category. They're older than 65 or that have compromised immune systems. And so I'm concerned about what that may bring today as well.
I did hear that one legislator and a friend of the show and has been on numerous times, I'll not mention his name, but his mother has contracted that and not in very good stead right now. So I'm not sure if he has been around or quarantined or what happens there, but you are right about that one. And they've decided to come back to the Dome. So we will see what happens with that. But it's supposed to go at 10 o'clock this morning in a one-day session, as far as you know?
I think it's after lunch today, Paul.
So it is after lunch. I thought it was at 10 o'clock. Okay.
I think it's after lunch. I'm not 100% sure, but that was what I saw streaming at some point last night. It's one of those things that, as we look at this, I've said from the beginning, in an emergency, if you're unhappy with the response, call me, call my office, and I will tell you, we've gotten thousands of calls every single day with ideas, with suggestions, and quite frankly, with just some people crying because they didn't know where their next meal was going to come from. That's what has to happen in an emergency. There has to have be one person where the buck stops with them. And while I haven't made every decision right in this process, I feel certain, and a year from now we'll look back and make those decisions, but I have made every single decision based upon what I believe to be in the best interest of the people of Mississippi. And so if the legislature decides today that they want to take away that authority from the governor and spread it out to the legislature, what that means to people back home is every time your hospital needs PPE, you're going to have to call your legislator and hope they can get it passed in a bill to get that PPE back to their hospitals. I don't think that's a good way to run an emergency. Certainly not a pandemic of this size, but that's not a good way to run an emergency in a tornado either. And so I'm hopeful that the rank and file members of the legislature will understand that this is not about power, it's not about control, it's about efficiently getting money to the people of Mississippi who do so desperately need it in these very, very difficult times for literally hundreds of thousands of our fellow Mississippians.
Governor Tate Reeves, for the record, if they do come in, which we know that they're going to do that, pass this bill and send it to your desk, for the record, you will veto it.
Well, what I said yesterday, Paul, and what I'm going to continue to say, and I'm not going to commit to vetoing any bill until I see what the language of the bill is. We have not been afforded that opportunity by either of the legislative leaders. And quite frankly, I don't believe that very many of the legislators have seen the language. I have talked to lots and lots of legislators over the last 24 hours, and they have not seen the language. I've yet to find anyone who admits that they have seen the language that they're going to vote on here in just a few hours. For such a sweeping change in legislation with literally people's lives at stake and people's livelihoods at stake, I'm hopeful that there is a very reasonable process in which everyone gets to discern what is in the best interest of their individual constituents, not what is in the best interest of the power struggles that exist within the legislative and executive branch. So we'll see exactly what the language says, and then we'll go from there.
You were talking about those numbers that are going to be released a little bit later on, or rather daunting. Just on a positive note, some of the things that we're talking about, loosening up some of the regulations and the restrictions, are you still on par with that?
Well, obviously, over the last couple of days, this topic that we're discussing this morning has been a major distraction with respect to our ability to respond to this disaster. We have spent an enormous amount of time trying to convince individuals in the legislature that this is not in the best interest of their constituents. Mm-hmm. We have every intention of issuing additional executive orders, but again, the legislature very well may take that authority away from us. We may not be able to issue executive orders if they change our emergency powers under the Emergency Powers Act that we have utilized to protect the people of Mississippi.
What about, quickly here, and we're almost running out of time, have you seen the April numbers? What do the April numbers look like?
We were $225 million under the estimate. So $225 million under the estimate for the month of April. Now, that's a huge number. That basically wipes away all of the excess revenue that we had collected from July 1 until the end of March, and so we're back close to even with only 2 months left in the fiscal year. We have very, very difficult times ahead of us from a budgetary standpoint, and these little distractions like we're finding today are not going to be good for the people of our state.
Wow. 225 under estimate. 225 million.
In the month of April. That's correct.
Short time to wipe out long-term gains, and that's a little bit scary. All right. Any final thoughts, sir?
Oh, well, my only final thoughts are I just want to thank the people that are listening today and thank them for paying attention, for being smart, for doing the right things in this pandemic. These distractions like this legislative session today should not distract from the people of Mississippi, understanding that we are working together to beat this disease. The people are doing great work. Let's keep on. Let's be smart. Do not, just because the legislature gets together in groups of 500 today, that does not mean that our executive order, which says people should not get together in groups of more than 10, is no longer valid. Please socially distance. Please wear a mask in public. Please do not spread this virus.
Governor Tate Reeves, thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much. Maybe the next time we'll get the both sides of us working on the uplink and the downlink and all that stuff.
We'll make that work, I promise.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much.
All right, thank you.